listen up, guys. Check it out. Check it out. We've already done section 4.3, and we know all three forms. We know standard form, we know point slope form, we know slope intercept form. So we're going to go back to section 4.2. Back then, you only knew y equals mx plus b. And they want you to write an equation that passes through the given point and has a given slope, and they want you to write it in y equals mx plus b. If you check the answer in the back, the answers are in y equals mx plus b form. So on number 1, it's really easy to write it in y equals mx plus b form because all you need is the slope and the y-intercept, right? So the slope is what on number 1? They give it to you 3. The slope is 3. How about the b value on number 1? Can't you just look at it and tell me the b value? -1 is the b value. So since you know your m and your b, the answer to number 1 is y equals mx plus b, which in this case is -1. There's your answer to number 1, and that's really easy to do. Now, back then, last week, when you actually did number 4, they gave you a point and they gave you a slope, and you did not know point slope form back then, right? So you were forced to use your x value, your y value, and your m value and plug it all into y equals mx plus b to find the b value so you could write your equation in y equals mx plus b form. But now that we're smarter, now that we know that third form that's called point slope, you could actually plug it into point slope form and make it quicker. Y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1 close parenthesis. So we could actually use this new knowledge to go back and do this homework a lot faster, right? We could actually just plug it into our blank spots. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot times x minus blank spot. And let's plug in our y1 value of 4, our m value of -3, and our x value of -5. And of course, change the minus to plus. Now, if you look at the back, they do not give you the answer like this. They don't, because they want it in slope-intercept form. Since we are so good at changing equations, let's do that. How would you change this to slope-intercept form? How would you do that? You want y by itself, you don't want parentheses. What are you going to do?
You first distribute.
Distribute, yeah. So -3 times x, what is that? That's -3x. And then -3 times 5, that's plus 15. Oh yeah, -15. I'm sorry. Not positive 15, -15. So we have -3x minus 15. We have the equal sign. We have y. We have -4. It's almost in slope-intercept form. All you have to do is get rid of that -4. Adding 4 there. Adding 4 over here. So your slope-intercept form equations, y equals -3x minus 11. Check the back, please. Is that right? Easy, right? So last week when we did this section, but it was it was WSPM. Right now we're doing WSP. Last week we didn't know about point slope form, so we were kind of stuck with y equals mx plus b, which if you're really comfortable with that, you could do that. That's fine. But I say if they give you a point and a slope, you might as well just plug it into point slope and then change it to whatever form they want you to do. So let's jump around here. Right here, I wouldn't use point slope form. I would use slope intercept. Why? Because you could count your slope from here to here. It goes down 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes over 1, 2, 3, 4. So down 4 over 4, that would be -4 over 4, which means that the slope is -1. And if you know your b value, which you know your b value, it's 5, you could easily write your equation in y equals mx plus b. Y equals 1x plus 5. So sometimes it's awesome to use point slope form. Sometimes you don't need point slope form. If you could see the m and you could see the b, might as well use slope intercept. Down here, they give you 2 points, okay? And we need to find the slope first. So on number 13, I need to find the slope first by using the slope formula. And the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Label them xy, 1, 1, xy, 2, 2. When you plug it in, do your division and subtractions first, then plug in y2, which is negative 4, y1, which is 0, x2, which is 5, x1, which is... Wait, did I do that wrong? I did that wrong. Y2 is negative 4, y1 is negative 4, not 0. So y1 is also negative 4. Sorry about that. And then x2 is 5, x1 is 0. Minus minus changes to plus plus. We have 0 over 5. And what is 0 divided by 5? 0. So the slope is 0. Oh yeah, that is weird. Okay, so if your m is 0 and you know your b value, they give you your b value here, then you could write it in slope-intercept form, y equals 0x minus 4 plus b, right? But the multiple choice answer or the answer in the back will be just y equals negative 4. They're not going to mess with 0x. That means that there is no x's. It was the exact same one, sorry. Let's go with one that we don't get 0. Let's try this one here. When we go for the slope, y2, y1, x2, x1, you have your x and your y, your x and your y. This is your first point, this is your second point. Let's plug in our y2 value, which is negative 6, our y1 value, which is 0, our x2, which is 1, our x1, which is negative 3. Minus minus changes to plus plus. Our slope will be negative 6 over 4, and this one would be negative 3 over 2 when you reduce it. So there's your slope. Now, they do want us to write it in slope-intercept form, but what's the easiest form to write it in right now? If you have some points and you have a slope, what's the easiest form? Point slope. So you could go y minus y1 equals m times parenthesis x minus x1. So when you do this, use blank spots. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot times x minus blank spot. And you could use the x1, y1. Sure, why not? Let's use that one. The y1, 0. The m value is negative 3 halves. Because we did the slope formula, we found out it was negative 3 halves. And the x1 value is negative 3. The minus minus changes to plus plus. So this is our point slope form equation, but that's not the answer because the instructions or the answer on the back of this particular worksheet is in slope-intercept form. So we need to change this point slope to slope-intercept. And slope-intercept does not have parentheses. So let's distribute that negative 3 halves. So when you distribute the negative 3 halves times x is negative 3 halves x. When you distribute negative 3 halves times 3, that's negative 9 over 2. That's if you would have put the 3 over 1 and then multiplied 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 1 is 2. And the y is by itself, we have y equaling negative 3 halves x minus 9 halves. Believe it or not, that is your answer. Check in the back, please. So this was an example of us not going with just y equals mx plus b. We found the m. Once you have the m and you have some points, go with point slope and then change it to slope-intercept form if you'd like. All right, guys, listen up, listen up. We're going to do a couple more problems from this homework. I'm not going to do all of them. No, this is the one I just gave you right now. So this worksheet, by the way, is from section 4.2, which is writing equations in slope-intercept form. Not point slope, it's slope-intercept form. So why am I going back to 4.2 if we've already done 4.3? The reason for that is you could apply today's knowledge of point slope form back in this slope-intercept form equation worksheet. So check it out, guys. Number 3, they want us to write the slope-intercept form equation, which is y equals mx plus b. And if you see the m and you see the y-intercept, the b value, if you have the m and you have the b, then you could just plug in your m and your b into slope-intercept form. Your m goes right here in blue, your b goes right here in red, and you could either do the plus or the minus depending if it's positive or negative. What do you see here on this graph? Do they give you the slope and the y-intercept? They give you a slope and they give you a point. So you could easily go to point slope form. But if they gave you the b value, you could easily go to the y equals mx plus b. Do they give you the b value?
Yes.
Yes. Where does it cross the y-axis?
At 4.
At 4? At negative 4, right here. Right? So you know the b value is negative 4. You know the m value is negative 1. They tell you that. So you could actually write your equation in y equals negative 1x plus 4, or plus b, which in this case is a minus 4. That's your y equals mx plus b equation. And if you flip the paper over to the back side, all of your answers are in y equals mx plus b form. But what I want to do is something like number 6, for example. Okay? Number 6, they want you to write an equation in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. What do they give you? They give you a slope and one coordinate, which 1 point, right? They give you a point and a slope. So we could plug everything into y equals mx plus b to solve for b. So you could have the m and the b, so you could write your equation in y equals mx plus b. Or you could say, if I have a point and I have a slope, what's a great form to write it in?
Point slope form.
If I give you a point and a slope, then go with point slope form, right? Point slope form right here is y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1 close parenthesis. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So we do have an x1, y1. We do have an m, so why not go with point slope form? Point slope form, the best way to do it is to rewrite it but blank. So y minus blank spot equals blank spot times x minus blank spot. And then plug in your y1 value. What's your y1 value?
Negative 5.
-5. What's your m value?
Negative 3 over 2.
What's your x1 value?
1.
Ladies and gentlemen, if they say write an equation in point slope form, you would be done. This would be your answer. But they don't say write it in point slope form. This section is from 4.2, which is slope-intercept. So they actually want you to write y equals mx plus b. So all you need to do is change the point slope so it could look like slope-intercept. Obviously, you don't want a fraction with parentheses, right? So let's get rid of the parentheses, and you don't want the minus 5, which is actually a plus 5. So you want to get y by itself, and you want to distribute to get rid of those parentheses. So some of us are thinking, let's get rid of the fraction. That would be great if they asked us to write it in standard form, because standard form doesn't have fractions. But slope-intercept does have fractions. So you could actually, if you want to, you could get rid of the fraction. I am going to distribute negative 3 halves times x. That's negative 3 halves x. Negative 3 halves times negative 1. That's a positive 3 halves. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And I do have a y plus 5 equaling that stuff. Now at this point, I want to get y by itself, so I would subtract 5, right?
Yeah.
But if I subtract 5 over here, I have fractions with numbers, and that kind of throws me off. So right here at this point, yeah, it makes sense. If you don't want to deal with that fraction, the 3 halves divided, or minus 5, if you don't want to deal with that fraction, go ahead and multiply everything by 2 to get rid of the fraction. So if you multiply everything by 2, this times 2, this times 2, this times 2, this times 2, everything by 2, you will get the new equation. Let me make some space here. 2y plus 10 equals negative 3x plus 3. Again, 2 times y is 2y. 2 times 5 is 10. The equal sign's right there. The 2 and the 2 cancel out, so you have a negative 3 left over. 2 and 2 cancel out, so you have a negative 3 left over, with an x, of course. And then these two cancel, and you have a positive 3 at the very end, positive 3 at the very end. So I got rid of my fractions. Now let's get y by itself. So you're going to subtract 10, and we'd have 2y equaling negative 3x minus 7. So for my final step here, to get y by itself, I would divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, and you'll get y equals mx plus b, negative 3 over 2 x plus b is simply a minus 7 over 2. Is that ugly? Yes. Is it the correct answer? I believe so. Check the back, please. Y equals negative 3 halves x minus 7 halves?
Yeah.
That's number 6. Is that the only way of doing it? No. We could go back to last week. Last week, how did we do this problem? Since we wanted slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, you could plug in the x value right in there. You could plug in the y value right over here. You could plug in the m value right in here where the m's at. And if you did do that, you would end up with this, this equation. Negative 5 equals negative 3 over 2 times x. X happens to be 1. And then plus b at the very end. And you'd have to solve for b. Okay, if you did solve for b, negative 3 halves times 1, that would be just negative 3 halves plus b equals negative 5. And if the fraction bothers you, you'd multiply everything by 2 right here. B times 2, the fraction times 2, that negative 5 times 2. You'd end up with a new equation, negative 10 equals negative 3 plus 2b. And then you would get rid of the minus 3 by going plus 3, and you'd end up with negative 7 equals 2b. So you'd get rid of the 2 in front of the b by dividing by 2, and you'd get your b value of negative 7 halves. So that's another way of doing it, right? You could do it any one you feel more comfortable with, right? So you could take the point and the slope and plug it into point slope form and then manipulate this equation so you could actually get your slope intercept, right? You could plug your point and your slope into point slope form and then change it to that. Or you could take your slope, your x and your y, and plug it all into y equals mx plus b. That way you could solve for b, and then you could write your equation in y equals mx plus b form. So if your m is negative 3 halves and your b is negative 7 halves, your equation would be y equals negative 3 halves x minus 7 halves. And that's the exact equation that we have over here. So it's really up to you which way you want to do it. I suggest, since we're practicing point slope form, you might as well use point slope form to get comfortable with it. But if you want to stick to all equals y equals mx plus b, you could do that. But I recommend trying point slope form. It's pretty easy. Does that make sense? Let's try one more. If it's graphed, it's easy because all you need is an m and a b, right?
Yeah.
And you could see it. But let's say 18? Yeah, why not? 18. So they give us 2 points. What could I find with 2 points? Slope. Slope is? What's the formula? y2 minus y1, x2, x1. You have your x, your y, your x, your y. This is your first point. This is your second point. When you use the formula, start with the division and the subtractions. That way you don't make mistakes. y2 is negative 1. y1 is 0. x2 is 5. x1 is 1. So when I do this math, negative 1 minus 0, that's still negative 1. And 5 minus 1, that is 4. So our slope is negative 1/4. Are you with me? Now at this point, you could use the slope that you just found and one of these points to plug it all into what? Point slope form. Or you could take the x, the y, and the m and plug it all into y equals mx plus b to find that missing b value that you need in order to write y equals mx plus b. It's totally up to you. But like I said, it's nice to practice point slope form, and you'll find that the more you practice, the easier it is, the nicer point slope form is. Point slope form is y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1. And we're plugging in, let's go with the first point right here, x1, y1. The y1 value, let's first start out with blank values. Y minus blank equals blank times x minus blank. So what's the y1 value? From above, what's the y1 value?
0.
0. Let's put 0 right there. How about the m value? What's the m value?
Negative 1/4.
-1/4. Let's put the -1/4 right there. How about the x1 value? x1 value is 1. Put it right there. Okay, so I have it in point-slope form, but they're not asking for point-slope form. The answers in the back are in slope-intercept. Slope-intercept have y by itself. Do we have y by itself right here?
No.
Technically, yeah, because -0 is just y, right? Y minus 0 is just y. Okay, so we don't even need that -0. So yeah, we have y by itself. That's great. But y equals mx plus b doesn't have parentheses. So I don't want these parentheses. What could I do? You could distribute the fraction. Or you could multiply everything by 4, but that's if you want standard form to get rid of fractions. You don't want to get rid of fractions here. Let's actually distribute -1/4 times x. That's -1/4 x. -1/4 times -1. That is a positive 1/4. And ladies and gentlemen, this is slope-intercept form. It's okay to have fractions in slope-intercept form. Now let me write it with the correct colors here, since we always write the M in blue and the B in red. This is going to cross the y-axis at positive 1/4, 1/4 of the way up to 1, and it goes down 1/4 if you were to graph it. You see, point-slope form is very easy. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. So there's a lot more questions on this worksheet. The answers are in the back. Like I said, you could stick with y equals mx plus b and completely ignore point slope, but point slope form is great. I mean, you just saw it right here. I found the slope easily with the slope formula, and then I used the point and the slope, and I got point slope form. And then it's just a question of distributing and moving things around, and it's in slope-intercept. Very easy to do. Good luck, guys. This stuff will be on Friday's test.